Thanks, Program Director. Thank you very much. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Many thanks for this opportunity. I've been asked to make a contribution around localization, advanced manufacturing, and I guess most importantly, how do we, some people call it re-industrialize the country, and I'm kind of saying, but were we really industrialized in the first place? Because selling commodities into global markets is not, in my definition, by any stretch, industrialization. So I think the aim here is to actually move from a situation where we had some type of a manufacturing base in South Africa. And if you go back 2 decades ago, so manufacturing contributed 23% as a percentage of GDP, and we are now down to 12%. So it's almost halved. So you can understand why there's this sort of healthy tension between what do we produce and what are we capable of producing locally, and what are we presently importing, and how do we bridge that gap, because it's clearly a gap. You would have seen that the trade stats that came through yesterday. We ran another trade deficit. It feeds into the budget deficit. The budget deficit is financed through hard currency, and given our difficult fiscal position, it's one of the first places you should be looking at in the country is how do you start bridging the trade deficit. And we had a meeting with the finance minister on Tuesday in preparation for his medium-term budget. And I said, Minister, the problem is we've been talking a lot about this, and you can carry on talking. So for me, the dead obvious place to start is take your top 100 imported products in the country and implement an import substitution strategy straight away. And what's interesting is, and where am I getting to with all of this, is that pharmaceuticals are in that top 100. In fact, you'll know the stat better than I do because it gets quoted all the time by DST and DTI, that pharmaceuticals and medical devices are the 5th biggest contributors to the trade deficit, the current account deficit actually. So I guess where I'm going to sort of angle my presentation this afternoon, 20 odd minutes that I've got, is we often hear that it's not possible to build a viable pharmaceutical manufacturing sector in the country, and we can't compete globally. Quite a lot of sort of doomsayer rhetoric that goes around. So I'd like to, sort of for any doomsayers out there, I'd like to give in my presentation how it can be done. It has been done, and I'm sure many other people will do it, and many people are currently doing it. So I just want to tell you what is in fact possible in South Africa. Just put shoulder to the wheel, the right commitment and conviction. I think anything's possible. I think Nelson Mandela said, everything seems impossible until you do it. And I kind of feel like that when we talk about pharmaceutical formulation and APIs. So let me give you a sense of, sorry if I can work. So I want to give you a sense of the company I work for, Aspen. And if you turn the clock back 20 years, and I know it's showing in my age, but exactly 20 years ago, Aspen operated out of a 2-bedroom apartment on the Berea, so overlooking the Greyville racetrack. Horse racing enthusiast. Not that you ever got to look out the windows, it was all, head down. But this is where we started. This 2-bedroom apartment, the sales office was in the 1-bedroom, and finance and admin in the 2nd bedroom, and sort of the meeting room was the dining room. And literally, that's how it started. And this is just a semblance of where we've evolved to. We've got manufacturing operations all around the world. In fact, we've got manufacturing in all 6 continents. South Africa, and specifically Port Elizabeth, remains our flagship manufacturing facility. We've got 11 factories there now, but we also have manufacturing of fine chemicals in Cape Town, We have manufacturing facilities in Ekurhuleni and also in East London. We sort of split that up according to different dosage forms and markets that we supply. But what's interesting in this is when you sort of start your business off, and when we started Aspen, we only really had in mind a couple of over-the-counter branded products, like a smoking cessation product. So that's kind of where we're going to focus, and we don't really want to move beyond it. And anyway, one thing led to another, and eventually we acquired South African Druggists. So you acquire this monolithic manufacturing plant, the old Lennon's facility, for those of you that remember it, and you say, well, now what? Because everyone's telling you you've overcapitalized, overpaid, and best that you either shut down the facility, divest it, downsize it, and rather look for tile manufacturing out of Asia. So that's what they told us. Okay, and kind of the more we looked at it, the more it made sense to keep manufacturing and try and differentiate yourself as a manufacturing organization. And we realized manufacturing is actually the heart and lungs of our business, and it identified itself then as a key differentiator, and I think we've built on that key differentiation. So we've been able to compete globally, and you'll see in a couple of moments sort of where we positioned that. But it was quite ironic that the parts of the business everyone was telling us to sell off is actually the part that's been our single biggest differentiator, probably our key success to globalizing it. I think Aspen is probably South Africa's most global company now. We operate in 75 markets. When I say operate, I mean we have an active presence, either marketing and sales and or manufacturing in those markets, and our products are sold in 150 markets globally. So then we are probably about the most globalized. So I'm just trying to illustrate to you that very often, I think in life, when you look at these things, what often looks like dead obvious and what often looks like what you shouldn't do, I think when you start, and it looks like you shouldn't do it because everyone's telling you it can't be done. But I think then the more you look at it and the more you realize, well, there's action opportunity here. And I think that's sort of the single message I'd like to leave you with today around localization and manufacturing aspirations. So just to illustrate that a bit more sort of finitely, if you go back to, I alluded to this old Lennon facility, and that's kind of what it looked like. My far right, that's kind of what it looked like. And if you fast track to today, this is just our Port Elizabeth facility, and this is a bit of an old photograph because we've just started investing in high potency, high containment manufacturing. So that's about a 3 billion rand investment, all told, the current and future. So that's what the sort of modern day facility looks like. Now, what's interesting about this facility is if you have a look at where it says unit 1, that's where the first antiretrovirals, generic antiretrovirals were produced, the African continent. It's pioneered by an African company on the African continent, but also the first facility in the world to receive US FDA approval on an expedited review process for an ARV outside of the US. So that was quite an achievement because all eyes were cast east for that first approval, and sort of everyone missed it because they should have looked south, and it happened. We sneaked in there and got that first approval. So this is a very important facility, but it's also an important facility because you'll see later on in my slides, Aspen has now become the world's #1 anesthetic company outside of the US. Now I'm sure all of you know, to manufacture anesthetics, so now I'm talking general anesthetics, transdermal and local. So general GAs, general anesthetics, are amongst the most complex technology, pharmaceutical technology you'll encounter anywhere. And I think at these sort of gloomy times when you're looking for good news stories, and sort of page 1 to 10 is about Eskom and Trillion and all the rest of it. You know, maybe page 1 should be that we're now number 1 in anesthetics in the world, and we are now number 2 outside of the US again. So, and we've got big plans in the US, which hopefully will materialize, but we are now number 2 in injectable antithrombotics. Also very, very complex, difficult technologies. And if you want to know how, I'm sure most of you will know this, but if you want to know how these antithrombotics, specifically the low molecular weight heparins, are produced, without sparing you all the gory detail, they are manufactured from the mucosa of pigs. And this has enabled us to become backwardly integrated right to the level of where the abattoir is. We don't own the abattoir, thankfully, but the minute they discard the mucosa, from that point in time we start a production process. It starts in the US, in Sioux City, it goes via the Netherlands, we've got a plant in the Netherlands, back into France, and then in future back down to Port Elizabeth, where we'll put these things into pre-filled syringes. So why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you all of this because as we became number 1 in anesthetics, we've taken a decision. It's not always popular in Europe, but we've taken a decision to relocate all the anesthetic manufacture back into Port Elizabeth. So that SVP2 site that you can see there, okay, futuristically will be probably the biggest manufacturing site for general anesthetics anywhere in the globe. And for those of you who are sort of in the trade, the brand, Corin, you'll know this brand, Diprovan. Okay, Diprovan and Prof. Barney will be manufactured in Port Elizabeth. It's a bit like saying we're going to manufacture the BMW 7 Series 9. So it's a bit like that. If I were you to use the car example vis-a-vis the pharmaceutical example, that's kind of the example that I would use. So it's quite a significant achievement for the country, and it just tells you that can be done. Okay, I'm just going to quickly skim by this slide. So just to let you know, as part of our globalization process, along the way we had to become globally competitive from where we started off 20 years ago, as I said. We bought SA Druggers 2 years later, very much domestically orientated manufacturing, and then one thing led to another, the ARVs I alluded to, and getting US FDA expedited registration, and we then moved on to MDR-TB, freeze-dried lyophilization. So we kept moving. All the time there was a global demand sort of for the product that started to manifest. So when we were doing lyophilization of a product called capreomycin, which is used for MDR-TB, as you'll know, when we were looking at that, we said, well, we're getting a US FDA facility here for lyophilization. What else is a sterile form that we can look to export, so that you start getting those economies of scale, because you cannot just depend on South Africa's domestic volume to make you globally competitive. You have to look at expanding beyond that. And we looked at it and we said, well, what else is sterols? Eye drops are sterols. So great. And before we knew it, we landed the manufacture of the 2nd and the 4th biggest OTC eye drops in the US. So the number 2 eye drop over the counter is Murine eye drops. Number 4 is Clear Eyes, and we send off about 13 million packs a year of eye drops we ship off to the US. So that all helps with this trade deficit. I'm talking about the conviction around bridging that trade deficit. And they're nice products, but they're branded products, and not everyone can make eye drops. I think a lot of people can make eye drops, but I think people were looking for a competitive and quality manufacturer. And often US very fixated around quality, they've been let down. So we had to step up to the plate and make sure that we were delivering both on the cost and on the quality. And we've been supplying them for the last 10 years, and sort of we moved into other areas of export, as I've indicated, not just anesthetics and antithrombotics, but we've moved into oncolytics and high potency products, etc., etc. So to get all of that right, though, you need to upgrade your facilities, which come at a significant investment. And these are some of the global international regulatory authority approvals that we've had to get along the way. Obviously, the most difficult one is the US FDA, but sort of not far behind is MHRA. But we do have both a mature or developed market and an emerging market focus at Aspen. We're probably the pharmaceutical company that's most uniquely positioned for emerging markets. And hence getting approval of the Brazilian authority like Anvisa, various others was important. And of course, let's not forget our own MCC, which is about to be renamed as SAPRA. So just to sort of cast the clock back a bit, so when we started moving into our own manufacturing and we started looking at global markets, we said, well, you know, in order to succeed, we've got to understand where South Africa's strengths lie and where our own strengths lie. We've got to build on that. It's no use being sort of aspirational, because people are telling you, well, you know, you can immediately dive into R&D. It's not the case. We don't have that capability yet as a country. But I've done my best. But I think what I wanted to sort of leave you, the key messages are, number one is understand where your strengths are. Because, you know, when you're in pharmacy, everyone's saying, but let's quickly go and find the next cure for, I don't know, Hodgkin's lymphoma. Okay, we just got to understand we don't have that capability in South Africa. Not yet. Okay, but what have we got? We've got a competitive manufacturing capability. And you tweak it a bit, and suddenly you start going through these different phases that I spoke about. Eventually you land up in a position where, as I said, you're number one in anesthetics globally, and you're looking to relocate all that manufacturing back into South Africa. So, from a manufacturing aspiration point of view, and what that means for the country is that these are highly skilled jobs that you're creating significant multiply effect back into the economy, upward and downward linkages, and above all, what you're doing is you're creating an environment where you're moving into advanced manufacturing all the time. So you keep raising the bar, and then people follow, they come with you. And that's what I'm saying, a number of people are doing that or aspiring to do that, and they will get there. It can be done. I've just shown you how it can be done. So just to wrap up then, just to let you know where Aspen is today. So we started off, as I said, exactly 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, our turnover was 0. And we've just released our 2017 results at 41 billion rand in revenue. And you can see that, notwithstanding some divestments we made last year, that still represented a 16% growth over the previous year. So it's not bad, you know, when you're growing off a base of like 35 billion rand, and we've been growing on a compounded 35% year-on-year growth. So when you start looking at the numbers like 35 billion, you're saying, well, can you do it again next year? No, last year they said, can you do it? You won't do it. And then you just keep going. You keep going by being smarter around these deals. And as I said, playing to your strengths and identifying where those niche opportunities sit. And I think what we often do in South Africa is we go into manufacturing sort of just aspiration and say, well, there's a volume there, so we'll get it. My advice is you've got to look at where the niche areas lie. And that's where we've taken and evolved our business to. So we've moved into anesthetics because they're hard to make, difficult to make. They're vaporizers. So what you're really doing is you've moved way up the value chain. And you've niched yourself quite nicely in that. That's when you can get real volumes, but also very complex manufacture back into the country. Okay, so I just want to show you, in summary, this 20-year journey. So I remember the day we hit our first billion rand turnover, it was in the year 2000. It was 3 years post-inception, people thought, geez, that's like a massive achievement, and really well, you hit $1 billion, and sort of little do you know that later on you're sitting at 19 billion. But what's interesting is your plan around diversifying your business into the world stage to get those volumes. So as I said, you can't depend on South Africa, the market's too small here. So sort of 15, 16 years on, you started to establish like a global footprint. And as you could see, South Africa, as a standalone business, has grown. Look at those, the blue. Look at the blue part of the pie chart. Actually grown. Okay. But what's interesting is you've now got in 2013 around 60% of your business sitting outside South Africa. But that's from a turnover point of view, not a manufacturing point of view. So as I said, a lot of the key is to bring the manufacturing back home where you can. So, and if you take that to the next level, where we're at the moment, you can just see now South Africa is like 20% of, South Africa is around 20% of revenue, and then you've got all your global markets. So you in some obscure markets like, I don't know, Latvia. And what's pleasing about this picture is two things. The first is when you land in Latvia or Bolivia or Ecuador, okay, what gives you an immense sense of pride when you walk into the Aspen office, there's a South African flag flying and an Aspen flag. And you could be in the most obscure place. You could be in Bogota, in Caracas, or in Kiev, literally. So I'm trying to tell you, it certainly can be done. And this is first-hand witness that it can be done. But even more sort of pleasing for me is what we've done on the manufacturing. So if you go back again to 2000, we started in 2000 here because that's when we took over the manufacturing facilities of SID. And in those days, most of our manufacturing was sitting in tablets. It's in Port Elizabeth. And then track it along. Suddenly you're in solids, you're in high potency, and you're in sterile products. Now, all of you in this room will know that the most complex of all of those manufacturing technologies is sterile. So this is where we are today. Okay, very much a specialty manufacturing platform these days, where you've got a mix of solids, steriles, high potency, and liquids. Okay, but more importantly is the future. And this is where the future is going to. The future is going to be more and more investment into sterile's capability. And sterile, of course, covers the anesthetics as well. So it's all in there. So who would have thought South African companies, one of the most prominent manufacturers of steroids? I think sort of 10 years ago it was absolutely unthinkable. But here it is, it can be done, as I said. Claudina spoke quite extensively about API capability. And our strategy here has been to look at niche APIs rather than to go with the high volume APIs, because you know there's a real risk that you can get annihilated in the market because people will start predatory pricing and all sorts of things. So we've gone with a niche approach, and this is sort of where we sit. So you can see that our fine chemicals business is around 34-35% of our API, and that's in South Africa. So a lot of people say we don't have API manufacturing in South Africa. That's not true. What's interesting about fine chemicals is most of the fine chemicals business commercially is export. And the biggest market for us is actually the United States. And it's going to get bigger and bigger as we move into hormonal products and we move into the more high potency type products. So very interesting approach, and it's one that's worked for us. So most of our revenue there is around exports, and our single biggest market, as I said, is the United States. Okay, then I think this is my second last slide. I just want to I've spoken a lot about moving from this sort of domestic manufacture into like high volume stuff with no margin, like ARVs, and then you start moving up the value chain. And at the apex of that value chain for us has been anesthetics and antithrombotics, anticoagulants. Just to give you a sense of the future around those two therapeutic areas. The first is, if you look at our anesthetic revenue breakdown presently, 55% of it comes out of mature markets or developed markets, and that includes markets like Europe, Japan, and then we've got 45% representation in emerging markets. I don't think there's another pharmaceutical company globally that is that well positioned in emerging markets. Emerging markets come with a lot of challenges and difficulties. So when you sit here in South Africa and you lament every day what's going on here, trust me, it's no different, often far worse in Latin America and Asia, what you encounter. So sometimes when you fly back home, you say, thank God I'm going home. But what's relevant here is this change in birth policy in China, for example. We are now moving to 2 kids per family as opposed to 1. I think you're going to average like 1.8. So now a 0.8 shift in China is massive. Why is that important to anesthetics? Because of the epidurals, all of that comes in. So we're expecting massive growth in China. But the important thing is to get that global establishment so you can move into markets like China. And then a similar sort of, similar thing could be said around our anticoagulant brands. And we own 4 brands globally, they're truly global brands. 57% sits in mature markets, 43% sits in emerging markets. So you take a market like Russia, for example, with its 200 odd million people. Russia spends 1/10 on anticoagulation relative to the EU. And the EU numbers are distorted because you put Eastern European countries in that now as well. So one of the highest prevalences, epidemiologically speaking, in Russia is strokes. So, that's how you've got to try and look at the market to see where you're going to get volumes. And that's why it made a lot of sense for us to get thrombotic together with an anesthetic. But just lastly, another important consideration when you're looking at getting that global competitiveness and moving to world-class global manufacture, synergies are very, very important. And I'm talking manufacturing and commercial synergies here. So what I mean by the manufacturing synergies are obvious. I've illustrated those to you. Come backwardly integrated, you're moving to niche manufacturing, and I've illustrated those. But when you look at the synergies commercially, one of your biggest contributors to OPEX in pharma is your sales and marketing and advertising and promotion. So your M&S and your A&P, significant contributors to operating expense. Very expensive heads. Those salespeople that you put into Europe, into Japan, they earn a fortune. They really do. So you sit back and I told you I want to be a rep in Japan, what they earn. So what we looked at, we said is you can't really, it doesn't make sense to invest in 2 different sales forces. So getting products that are complementary, that one salesperson can take into the same target audience, and how you've segmented the market, very important. So we're fortunate because our key customer for both thrombolytics and anesthetics is the anaesthetist. So we're lying on that theatre table, and you're my age and younger, hip replacement, knee replacement, you're going to need an antithrombotic. And that same anaesthetist is going to give you the Dipravan, and it's also probably going to give you the Rixtrin to prevent clotting. So that type of approach. So commercial and manufacturing synergy is very important in establishing that global outlook. So colleagues, I'm going to end off there. It was really a lot to cover in not 20 minutes, and I'm acutely aware I've gone over my time. I apologize for that. But I really, just to conclude, wanted to give you a sense, again at the sake of being repetitive, that when we question ourselves and second guess ourselves as South Africans, can it be done? Are we just going to flirt around with domestic volumes? You're not really going to get far if you just flirt around with domestic volumes. You've got to have a much broader outlook, but you've got to start at home first. And I think what's been great for us is we've been able to leverage the country's strengths and our own strengths, and very often bring that manufacture back into South Africa. As I said, it doesn't make you popular in Europe when you're shedding jobs. We've seen that with the press, with respect to Aspen. But it's all part of that globalization process, and you've got to sort of ride with the waves when you can. So very important is to have that strategy to diversify your manufacturing base. And what's another sort of very pleasing aspect is, when we bought these plants in Germany and in Netherlands and in France, what's great is that you're sending people from Port Elizabeth, people that have come out of like New Brighton Township, but they've done 15, 20 years at Aspen. And those people go to Baderslow or Notre Dame de Bonneville, wherever, or Oss in the Netherlands, and they teach the Europeans a thing or two. For me, that's the most pleasing aspect about globalizing your company and about getting into globally competitive manufacturing, is that your people move with you, and great for them to have taught the Germans a thing or two. Thanks very much.